March 23, 1945. Reims, France. Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force. General Dwight D. Eisenhower sits behind his mahogany desk inside what was once a champagne warehouse, now converted into the nerve center of the Allied war effort. Outside, spring rain drums softly against the windows. Inside, every wall is buried beneath maps, red and blue lines marking Allied advances across Germany, bold arrows pointing east toward Berlin, dotted supply routes stretching all the way back to Normandy. Eisenhower is buried in logistics. Fuel allotments for First Army. Artillery ammunition for Ninth Army. Replacement troops for Hodges's battered divisions. The quiet, relentless paperwork of war, endless, essential, exhausting. The door opens. His chief of staff, General Walter Bedell Smith, steps inside. His face gives nothing away. In his hand is a single sheet of paper, a prisoner of war status report, 3rd Army, dated March 23, 1945, 0600 hours. Smith places it on the desk without a word. Eisenhower glances down. His hand stops mid-signature over a fuel requisition form. He blinks, reads the figure again. His expression doesn't shift to anger or shock. It goes blank. The kind of silence that occurs when the mind briefly refuses to process information because it simply doesn't make sense. Bedell, Eisenhower says quietly, "This says 50,000. "Yes, sir. 50,000 prisoners. In one night. 18 hours, to be precise, sir." Eisenhower looks up slowly. "Check this again." "Already did. Twice. 12 Corps reports 28,000. XX Corps reports 22,000. Total confirmed. 50,127 enemy prisoners of war captured between 1,800 hours, March 22nd, and 1,200 hours, March 23rd. Eisenhower sets down his pen. He reaches for the intelligence summary from 21st Army Group, Field Marshal Montgomery's command in the north, and scans the numbers. 47,000 prisoners, 8 divisions, 4 weeks of operations. Patton has exceeded that total in 18 hours with 6 divisions. How many POW cages does 3rd Army currently have operational? Eisenhower asks. 17, sir. As of this morning, they're requesting 12 more. Emergency priority. 12 more. Eisenhower repeats. Why? They've run out of barbed wire, sir. Eisenhower stares at him. They ran out of barbed wire in one night. Smith's expression doesn't change. Apparently, sir, when you capture 50,000 prisoners, you require roughly 90 miles of fencing to contain them in accordance with Geneva Convention standards. 3rd Army exhausted its entire theater allocation before dawn. That's impossible. Smith pauses. Apparently not, when you're George Patton, sir. Eisenhower stands and walks to the situation map. His finger traces 3rd Army's position. The Palatinate pocket, the wedge of German-held territory between the Rhine, the Moselle, and the Siegfried Line. 2 weeks earlier, intelligence estimated 14 German divisions trapped there, battered, undersupplied, but entrenched. Shape planners had projected 2 weeks to reduce the pocket, methodical advances, coordinated artillery, careful elimination of strong points. Patton cleared it in 3 days. Give me 3rd Army headquarters, Eisenhower says. But the prisoner count wasn't even the worst part. Patton hadn't asked permission for any of it. Before we go any further, if you're fascinated by the untold moments of World War II, the decisions, the personalities, the impossible achievements that shaped history, make sure you're subscribed to WWII Elite. Hit the like button and leave a comment telling us which World War II commander you want us to cover next. We bring you the stories the history books gloss over. Now, back to March 1945, when Eisenhower realized his most aggressive general had just rewritten the rules of mobile warfare. March 23, 1945, 1,600 hours. The phone line crackles with static as it connects Supreme Headquarters in Reims to 3rd Army's forward command post in Oberstein, Germany. Eisenhower lifts the receiver. His voice is calm, measured. The voice of the man who has learned never to show surprise when dealing with George S. Patton. George, I'm looking at a report that says you captured 50,000 prisoners without requesting additional processing units and without coordinating with Army Group Logistics. Care to explain? There's a pause. Then Patton's voice comes through, confident, unapologetic. Well, sir, the Germans kept surrendering. Didn't seem right to tell them to come back tomorrow once the paperwork cleared. This isn't a joke, George. Wasn't joking, sir. 12 Corps broke through near Kaiserslautern. XX Corps hit them from the south. They collapsed faster than we expected. By midnight, entire regiments were surrendering without firing a shot. Some of them were marching themselves to the rear. We didn't even have enough MPs. Eisenhower closes his eyes. He can picture it. Patton's armor punching through weak points. Infantry pouring in behind. German units exhausted, cut off, surrounded, realizing there was no escape. The Third Army steamroller, doing what it does best, moving so fast the enemy can't react. Montgomery spent a month preparing Operation Plunder, Eisenhower says. Massive artillery, airborne drops, 2 divisions. He's crossing the Rhine methodically, by the book, with every resource we can give him. And I crossed it last night. Patton cuts in. Didn't lose a man. You should have that report on your desk by morning. Silence. Complete. Total. Silence. Eisenhower's staff officers freeze in place. Bedell Smith stops mid-step. Every man in the room is watching the Supreme Commander, studying his face as it absorbs what Patton has just said. You cross the Rhine, Eisenhower says. His voice is very, very quiet. When were you planning to tell me? I'm telling you now, sir. 11th Armored Division. 20 to 30 hours last night. Assault boats south of Mainz. Barely any opposition. We're 6 miles deep already. Frankfurt's within reach. Eisenhower's hand tightens around the receiver. George, you're going to give me a heart attack. SHAF allocated resources for Montgomery's crossing. We planned it for weeks. Churchill is watching from an observation post. This was supposed to be the official Allied Rhine crossing. You just decided to freelance? Every hour we wait is an hour the Germans use to regroup. I had a bridgehead at Oppenheim. I had the boats. I had momentum. I took the shot. If I'd waited for authorization, they'd have reinforced the East Bank, and we'd have lost men we didn't need to lose. There's logic in that. Eisenhower knows it. Patton is reckless, yes. Insubordinate, absolutely. But he's also right more often than he's wrong. And when Patton is right, he's devastatingly effective. We'll discuss this when you return to headquarters. Eisenhower says at last. Until then, try not to conquer the entire Wehrmacht without informing anyone. Understood, sir. The line goes dead. Patton has hung up. Eisenhower slowly sets down the receiver and looks at Smith. Bedell, notify the Army Group commanders. Third Army has crossed the Rhine. Unauthorized. Successful. No casualties. He exhales. Montgomery is going to love this. Smith almost smiles. Yes, sir. I'll draft the message carefully. At Third Army headquarters in a Daroberstein, Patton hangs up the phone and turns to his staff, his operations officer, intelligence chief, logistics coordinator, all watching him, waiting. Gentlemen, Patton says with a grin, the Supreme Commander would like us to slow down. Colonel Hobart Hap, Maddox raises an eyebrow. Are we slowing down, sir? Patton walks to the map and taps a point on the main river, 30 miles beyond their current position. We'll be across the Main by midnight. 4th Armored leads. I want Frankfurt by tomorrow afternoon. By March 24th, 3rd Army's prisoner intake has completely overwhelmed the European theater POW system. They are holding 63,000 prisoners in facilities designed for 15,000. Military police battalions work around the clock, constructing improvised compounds using whatever materials they can find. barbed wire stripped from German pillboxes, wooden posts pulled from roadblocks, even sections of the Siegfried Line, Dragon's Teeth repurposed as fence posts. 12 Corps sends an urgent report. German officers are organizing their own men because there aren't enough American guards. Prisoners are forming their own work details, cooking meals from captured supplies, even posting their own sentries to prevent escapes. It is organized chaos, functional, but barely. The International Red Cross cables SHAF. Geneva Convention requires adequate shelter, food, and medical care within 24 hours of capture. Current Third Army facilities exceed capacity by 400%. Immediate action required. At SHAF headquarters, General John C. H. Lee, the logistics commander responsible for supplying 9 Allied armies, arrives at Eisenhower's office with a stack of reports and a look of barely contained frustration. "Sir," Lee says, spreading charts across the desk, Third Army has consumed 110% of its allocated fuel for March. Ammunition expenditures exceed allotments by 40%. They're requisitioning rations from First Army depots without authorization. And according to this report, they've captured so many German vehicles that they're using enemy trucks to haul their own supplies. Eisenhower studies the charts. Red ink everywhere. "Is it working?" he asks. Lee blinks. "Sir, is Patton's advance working?" Lee hesitates. "They're advancing so fast our supply columns can't keep up. Patton is capturing German depots and using their fuel. He's literally running his army on enemy logistics. Yesterday, XX Corps sees a fuel dump near Darmstadt. He ordered it issued directly to his tank battalions. Didn't even report it through proper channels." Eisenhower looks up. "But is it working?" Lee looks down at the charts, then back up. "Perfectly, sir," which is somehow worse. Eisenhower almost smiles. "Almost. How much fuel are we saving?" "Preliminary estimates suggest 2.1 million gallons over 2 weeks, sir, plus 3 weeks of transportation capacity." He's essentially forcing the enemy to supply his own defeat. "Then let him keep doing it," Eisenhower says. "But make sure someone documents everything. If we ever have to fight like this again, I want to know exactly how he pulled it off." But Eisenhower's problems were only beginning, because on March 26th, Patton stopped answering his phone. March 25th, 1945. 21st Army Group Headquarters, near Venlo, Netherlands. Field Marshal Bernard Law Montgomery, commander of British Second Army, Canadian First Army, and the U.S. Ninth Army temporarily under his control, sits in his caravan, reading the morning intelligence summary. Operation Plunder is scheduled to begin tonight. The official Allied crossing of the Rhine. 3 weeks of preparation. 80,000 troops. 3,500 artillery pieces. 2 airborne divisions dropping behind enemy lines. Churchill himself will be watching from an observation post on the West Bank. It will be methodical, by the book, overwhelming force applied systematically. The British way. Montgomery's intelligence officer steps forward and hands him a report. Third Army Operation Summary. March 22nd, 1945. 2,200 hours. Montgomery reads the report. His expression doesn't change. He is a master control, but those who know him well can see the tension around his eyes. Patton crossed the Rhine last night. Assault boats. Night crossing. No preliminary bombardment. No massive artillery preparation. Just boats and infantry. And he is already 6 miles deep. Montgomery sets the report down. He picks up a message form and writes carefully, precisely, to Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force. From 21st Army Group, please confirm that 3rd Army operations do not interfere with Operation Plunder timeline. Coordinated Allied advance remains essential to overall success. Recommend immediate clarification of command boundaries and operational objectives. Montgomery's Chief of Staff reads a message and understands the subtext immediately. Translation. Tell Patton to stop showing me up. The message is sent. At SEF, Bedell Smith reads it aloud to Eisenhower. Eisenhower exhales. This is the part of Supreme Command no one talks about. Managing egos, balancing personalities, keeping brilliant, difficult men focused on the same objective instead of competing with one another. Draft a response. Eisenhower says, assure Field Marshal Montgomery that Operation Plunder remains the main effort. Third Army's crossing is a supporting operation. Emphasize coordination, especially since Patton is already deeper into Germany than Plunder's initial objectives. Smith nods. Monty needs to know his operation matters. It does. Eisenhower says, we need crossings all along the Rhine, not just Patton's mad dash in the south. Smith begins drafting. Eisenhower studies the map. Patton is driving toward Frankfurt. Montgomery is preparing his crossing in the north. First Army is consolidating at Remagen. Ninth Army is supporting 21st Army Group. The Allied advance is working. It's just not working the way anyone planned, which Eisenhower is learning is exactly what happens when George Patton is involved. And then Churchill gets involved. March 26, 1945. Prime Minister Winston Churchill arrives at Montgomery's headquarters to personally observe Operation Plunder. He brings photographers, war correspondents, and members of Parliament. This is meant to be the British Empire's triumphant crossing of the last great natural barrier to Berlin, a historic moment. Churchill is briefed on the operation, the maps, the artillery plan, the airborne landings. It is impressive, overwhelming. Everything a set-piece operation is supposed to be. Then someone mentions that Third Army crossed the Rhine 2 days earlier in assault boats. Churchill's expression is unreadable. He turns to Montgomery. Is this true? Yes, Prime Minister. General Patton conducted an unauthorized crossing south of Mainz on the evening of March 22nd. Unauthorized. He did not coordinate with Supreme Headquarters or neighboring armies prior to execution. Churchill absorbs this. Montgomery's intelligence officer points to the map. They've advanced 45 miles beyond the Rhine as of this morning, Prime Minister. They're approaching Frankfurt. Churchill stares at the map. Then he does something no one expects. He smiles. A broad, genuine Winston Churchill smile. Well, gentlemen, Churchill says, it appears the Americans have stolen a march on us. How very enterprising of General Patton. He turns to Montgomery. Bernard, I suggest we ensure that Operation Plunder is executed with such overwhelming success that no one remembers who crossed first. They may have crossed in boats. We shall cross with the full weight of the British Empire behind us. It is a diplomatic masterpiece, acknowledging Patton's achievement, while reframing Plunder as a decisive event. Churchill understands what Eisenhower understands. This isn't a competition. It's a war. And right now, the Allies are winning. That doesn't stop Montgomery from sending another message to SATF, requesting clarification on whether Third Army's advance might be moving a bit too fast for proper coordination with neighboring forces. Eisenhower reads it, then hands it to Smith. Bedell, what's the diplomatic way to say let Patton run? Smith considers. I'll think of something, sir. What happened next would force Eisenhower to say words he never thought he'd say about George Patton. March 27, 1945. SHAF Operations Room. The situation map is updated every 6 hours with the latest unit positions. That morning, the officers updating Third Army's markers run into a problem. Sir, a young lieutenant says to the duty officer, I can't confirm these positions. According to this report, 4th Armored Division is at Frankfurt. Yesterday, they were 30 miles west. That's impossible in 24 hours with opposition. The duty officer checks the radio logs, reviews the position reports, compares them to yesterday's map. The lieutenant is right. 4th Armored Division has moved 30 miles overnight. 12 Corps is at Wiesbaden. XX Corps has taken Darmstadt. 3rd Army is advancing faster than the map can track. Update the markers. The duty officer says, Note estimated positions, unconfirmed. We'll clarify with the next report. By the time the next report arrives, the positions have changed again. SHAF reduces the update cycle to every 4 hours, then every 2. They still can't keep up. By the time Third Army's location is marked, Patton's units are already beyond it. It's unprecedented. German resistance is collapsing. Not because units are being destroyed in battle, but because by the time orders arrive to establish defensive lines, American tanks are already behind them. At 21st Army Group headquarters, Montgomery's British liaison officer to 3rd Army submits a report, March 28th. 3rd Army is 13 days ahead of schedule. Montgomery reads it, says nothing. He returns to planning Operation Plunder's follow-on operations. If Patton is going to ignore the timetable, Montgomery will ensure that British forces execute their part flawlessly. At 3rd Army headquarters, Patton is studying his maps when his intelligence officer, Colonel Oscar Koch, enters with the latest prisoner figures. Sir, as of 1,200 hours today, total prisoners captured since March 22nd, 91,000. Patton looks up. 91? Yes, sir. 12 Corps, 41,000. XX Corps, 33,000. 8 Corps, 17,000. We've captured more prisoners in 6 days and, well, sir, than anyone. Patton grins. Oscar, send a message to General Bradley. Tell him if he can get me enough gasoline, I'll have 3rd Army in Berlin in 48 hours. Koch hesitates. Sir, should we clear that with SHAF first? Send a message, Oscar. The message reaches 12th Army Group headquarters. General Omar Bradley, Patton's immediate superior and longtime friend, reads it, shakes his head, and picks up the phone. Ike, Bradley says, I've given up trying to control George. I just call him every morning to find out where he is. Yesterday, he was supposed to be securing bridgeheads. Today, he's about to cut off Army Group B's entire retreat route. Tomorrow, he'll probably be in Bavaria. On the other end of the line, Eisenhower is silent for a moment. Brad, he finally asks, is he achieving objectives? Bradley exhales. He's achieving objectives that weren't scheduled for another 2 weeks. Then let him run. Eisenhower says, but make sure someone is keeping track of what he's doing. If this works, we're going to need to study it. And if it doesn't, Bradley finishes the thought silently. He hangs up, turns to his chief of staff. Give 3rd Army priority on fuel shipments. And start drafting after-action reports. Detailed ones. Because nobody is going to believe this when the war is over. On the German side, the view is very different and deeply alarming. General Hermann Bulk commands Army Group G, the German forces facing Patton in southern Germany. A veteran of the Eastern Front, he has fought the Soviets and understands fast, aggressive armored warfare. But this, on March 28th, Bulk attempts to establish a defensive line along the main river. He issues orders to 3 divisions. Hold the crossings, deny the Americans bridgeheads, buy time for Army Group B to withdraw from the Ruhr. By the time those orders reach his forward units, American tanks are already across the Main. The defensive line Bulk tried to create never truly exists. After the war, during Allied interrogation, Bulk will say, we cannot understand Patton's speed. Our doctrine called for consolidation. After river crossings, rest, resupply, bring up artillery, prepare the next phase. Patton simply never stopped. By the time orders arrived to establish a defensive line, his tanks were already behind it. It was like fighting a forest fire. Everywhere we tried to contain it, it had already spread. Another German officer will put it more bluntly. Patton didn't fight us. He overran us. There's a difference. Even the Soviet liaison officer at SHAF takes notice. On March 28th, he sends a report to Moscow. American General Patton advancing at rates comparable to 1944 Soviet operations during the Bag Ration Offensive. German forces captured before defensive positions can be established. Recommend detailed study of American mobile warfare techniques for future operations. The Red Army, the force that pioneered deep battle doctrine and perfected operational maneuver, is impressed by Patton's speed. That is how fast Third Army is moving. By March 28th, Third Army has advanced more than 87 miles beyond the Rhine in 5 days. They have captured over 93,000 prisoners, destroyed or seized 1,400 German vehicles, and are threatening to encircle the entire German Army Group B in the Ruhr, an operation SADF planners estimated would take 6 weeks. Patton has completed the preliminary work in less than one. At his forward headquarters, Patton studies a map, tracing routes toward Berlin, toward Prague, toward Munich. He turns to his staff. Gentlemen, we have the Germans on the run. Every hour we maintain momentum is an hour they can't regroup. I don't care if we're ahead of schedule. I don't care if logistics is screaming. We keep moving until they tell us to stop, and maybe not even then. Someone asks about casualties. Patton's answer is immediate. We're taking fewer casualties moving fast than we would moving slow. Speed is armor. Speed is firepower. Speed wins wars. He is right. Third Army's casualties during the March offensive are remarkably low, less than half of what SHAF projected for operations of this scale. German units surrender rather than fight. Strong points are bypassed instead of reduced. Patton has grasped something fundamental. In mobile warfare, speed itself is a weapon. But back at SHAF, one question dominates every conversation. How much longer can he keep this up? March 29, 1945. General Dwight D. Eisenhower decides he needs to see it for himself. He boards his personal C-47 and flies to Frankfurt, captured by Patton that very morning. The airfield is still being cleared of wrecked German aircraft when Eisenhower's plane touches down. Patton is waiting on the runway. Fresh uniform, polished boots, ivory-handled revolver at his hip. Grinning, Eisenhower steps off the aircraft and takes in the captured German airfield. In the distance, the skyline of Frankfurt rises through lingering smoke. Fires from recent fighting still smolder along the horizon. George, Eisenhower says, "Do you have any idea how many regulations you violated in the past week?" Patton snaps a crisp salute. "No, sir. I've been too busy winning the war." They walk toward Patton's command vehicle, a captured German staff car appropriated somewhere along the advance. Inside, maps cover every surface. Situation reports, intelligence summaries, logistics updates. The organized chaos of a headquarters that moves too fast to ever settle. "You exceeded your fuel allocations," Eisenhower says, studying the maps. "You captured more prisoners than our system can process. You crossed the Rhine without authorization. And you've advanced so far ahead of First Army that you're carrying exposed flanks for 60 miles. Patton pulls out a larger map and spreads it across the hood of the car. "Ike, look at this. We've cut off 7th Army's retreat right here. 12 Corps and XX Corps will close the gap in 2 days, maybe less. We seal the Ruhr pocket." He taps the map again. "That's 300,000 German soldiers out of the war. Maybe more. They can't retreat. They can't resupply. They're finished." Eisenhower studies the map. The logic is undeniable. Third Army's advance has created an opportunity SHAF planners didn't expect for another month. The Ruhr, the industrial heart of Germany, defended by some of the Wehrmacht's best remaining formations, is about to be sealed off, not through careful, methodical operations, through speed. And Montgomery? Eisenhower asks. Patton doesn't hesitate. "Monty's doing fine. He's got the North. I've got the center. Between us, we're ending this war. His way works. My way works. They're different, but they both work." It's the most diplomatic thing Patton could have said. And it's true. Montgomery's methodical, overwhelming approach is succeeding. Patton's fast, aggressive style is succeeding. The Germans cannot defend against both at the same time. Eisenhower looks again at the map. 93,000 prisoners, the Rhine bridgehead. The drive toward the Ruhr shattered German divisions collapsing in sequence. Then he looks at Patton, exhausted, exhilarated, already thinking 3 moves ahead. "George," Eisenhower says quietly, "you're either going to win this war 6 months early or get us all court-martialed." Patton grins. "I'll take those odds, sir." Eisenhower almost smiles. Almost. 50,000 prisoners in one night. Eisenhower continues. More than an entire army group captured in a month. Do you know what that means? Patton's grin widens. That Third Army gets first pick of the German beer stocks when we reach Bavaria. Eisenhower shakes his head. He's frustrated. He's impressed. He's exasperated. He's watching a man who operates by rules that don't exist in any doctrine, who achieves results that shouldn't be possible, who makes the impossible look routine. And then Eisenhower says it. The words that define Patton. The words that acknowledge what everyone already knows but hasn't quite articulated. "George," Eisenhower says, "you're the only man I know who can make the impossible routine." Silence. Patton stops grinning, just for a moment. He understands what Eisenhower has said. This wasn't a compliment. It wasn't a reprimand. It was recognition. Other commanders planned for what was possible. They calculated logistics, assessed enemy strength, estimated timelines, prepared contingencies. They operated within the limits of the achievable. Patton operated somewhere else entirely. He didn't break rules out of recklessness. He transcended them because his operational tempo existed on a different plane. He understood something about modern warfare that doctrine hadn't yet caught up to. Momentum is its own force multiplier. When you move faster than the enemy can react, when you deny them time to consolidate, when you turn their expectations against them, the impossible becomes inevitable. The 50,000 prisoners weren't an anomaly. They were proof. German units didn't surrender because they were defeated in battle. They surrendered because by the time they received orders to defend, American tanks were already behind them. Resistance became meaningless when the enemy was everywhere at once. Eisenhower understood this now. Patton's chaos wasn't chaos at all. It was a highly sophisticated form of warfare, one that violated every principle of methodical advance, yet achieved in days what orthodox tactics would have taken weeks to accomplish. "Thank you, sir," Patton says quietly. Then the grin returns. "Now, about that gasoline allocation." Eisenhower laughs. "Get back to work, George, and try to leave some Germans for the rest of us to capture." The Palatinate Rhine Campaign, March 13 to March 28, 1945, resulted in Third Army capturing 113,000 German prisoners, more than the entire British 21st Army Group during the same period, despite having fewer divisions. By April 1st, Third Army had advanced 120 miles beyond the Rhine. The Ruhr pocket was closed on April 4th, trapping 317,000 German soldiers, the largest encirclement in the Western theater. Third Army completed the preliminary work in less than 1 week. When you lay out the numbers, the statistics are staggering. Patton's Rhine crossing at Oppenheim was executed with 16 assault boats under cover of darkness. No preliminary bombardment. 0 casualties. Montgomery's Rhine crossing at Wesel, Operation Plunder, involved 80,000 troops, 3,500 artillery pieces, and 2 airborne divisions dropped 24 hours after Patton crossed. Casualties, 3,968. Both crossings succeeded. Both were necessary. But the contrast could not be clearer. SHAF Logistics later calculated that Patton's systematic use of captured German fuel depots, ammunition stockpiles, vehicle parks, and supply dumps saved the Allied supply chain approximately 2 million gallons of fuel and nearly 3 weeks of transportation capacity. He quite literally forced the enemy to supply his own defeat. Yet the numbers tell only part of the story. The real story lies in what Patton understood, what made staff officers nervous and enemies genuinely terrified. In warfare, speed is not merely a tactical advantage. It is a strategic weapon. Every hour Third Army kept moving was an hour the German command could not reorganize, could not establish defensive lines, could not execute an orderly retreat, could not bring up reserves, could not coordinate with neighboring units. The 50,000 prisoners captured in one night were not taken because Third Army was stronger. They were taken because Third Army was faster. Speed created a cascade of collapse. German units lost contact with higher headquarters. Orders became obsolete before they could be carried out. Defensive plans disintegrated because by the time positions were prepared, American tanks were already past them. Patton weaponized momentum, and once he seized it, he never let it go. Eisenhower's genius, true genius, was recognizing that Patton's apparent chaos was not chaos at all. It was a sophisticated form of warfare that doctrine had not yet caught up with. Though it violated every principle of methodical advance, it achieved results conventional operations could not. In his memoir Crusade in Europe, 1948, Eisenhower wrote, Patton's operations during the Rhine crossing period demonstrated that calculated audacity, when backed by competent staff work and aggressive leadership, can compress timelines that conventional planning deems impossible. I spent half my time reining him in, and the other half wondering why I bothered. That sentence captures the essence of the Eisenhower-Patton relationship. Eisenhower knew Patton was difficult. He knew he was insubordinate. He knew he created logistical nightmares and diplomatic headaches. But he also knew that when you pointed George Patton at the enemy and told him to attack, impossible things happened. In June 1945, General George C. Marshall, Army Chief of Staff and architect of the American war effort, reviewed the European campaign statistics and noted something extraordinary. Third Army's prisoner capture rate in March 1945 exceeded the entire United States Army's prisoner capture rate during the final German offensive of World War I. One army, 1 month, 113,000 prisoners. Marshall wrote a handwritten note on the report, now preserved in the National Archives. Recommend study of Third Army operations as basis for future mobile warfare doctrine. Also recommend keeping Patton away from supply officers. Even George Marshall, methodical, disciplined, relentlessly by the book, recognized that Patton had uncovered something worth studying, something that transcended conventional military wisdom. The man who captured 50,000 Germans in a single night ended the war having taken 956,000 prisoners, more than any other Allied army. American, British, Canadian, French, none came close. And he did it while perpetually short on fuel, perpetually over budget, perpetually ahead of schedule. Third Army's final statistics tell the story. 531 days of combat operations, 1.3 million miles traveled, 12,000 cities and towns liberated or captured, 956,000 prisoners taken, approximately 400,000 enemy casualties inflicted. Third Army's own casualties totaled approximately 137,000, including 21,000 killed in action. That represents a prisoner capture ratio of 7-to-1. For every American casualty, Third Army removed 7 German soldiers from the war. That ratio is almost unheard of in military history. After the war, military historians studied Third Army relentlessly, attempting to understand how Patton achieved what he achieved. The U.S. Army Command and General Staff College dedicated an entire course to analyzing the March 1945 offensive. The conclusion was both simple and profound. Patton understood that in mobile warfare, the enemy's decision-making cycle is a true vulnerability. If you can move faster than the enemy can observe, orient, decide, and act, if you can complete multiple operations before the enemy finishes reacting to the first, you create paralysis. The enemy is defeated not through destruction, but through disorientation. German General Hermann Bulk, interviewed extensively after the war, summarized it best. Patton's operations were not simply fast. They were incomprehensible. We could not predict where he would strike next because he did not follow predictable patterns. He attacked where we were weak, bypassed where we were strong, and never paused long enough for us to reorganize. It was like fighting smoke, everywhere and nowhere at the same time. That may be the most accurate description of Patton's method ever recorded. Fighting smoke, everywhere and nowhere. The Soviet Union studied Patton's operations extensively. Soviet deep battle doctrine, developed in the 1930s and refined during the Great Patriotic War, emphasized many of the same principles Patton practiced instinctively: speed, momentum, relentless pressure, and deep penetration into the enemy's rear. Soviet military theorists recognized in Patton a kindred spirit, a commander who understood operational art at the highest level. In Soviet military academies after the war, Patton's March 1945 offensive was taught alongside Soviet operations as a model for conducting deep penetration warfare against a collapsing enemy. The irony is that Patton never studied Soviet doctrine. He didn't need to. What Soviet theorists developed systematically on paper, Patton understood intuitively through combat. Great military minds, it seems, converge on the same truths, regardless of doctrine, nationality, or ideology. But perhaps the most telling tribute to Patton comes from an unexpected source. In 1947, during the Nuremberg trials, German Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel, chief of the OKW, the German High Command, was asked a simple question: which Allied general did the Germans fear most? His answer was immediate: Patton. We always knew where Montgomery was going. We could usually predict Eisenhower's decisions. Bradley was methodical. But Patton, we never knew where he would strike next. And once he started moving, we couldn't stop him. That was the verdict of the enemy. The man the Germans feared most. The general who captured 50,000 prisoners in one night. The commander who made the impossible routine. George S. Patton died in December 1945, killed in a car accident in Germany. He never returned home to the hero's welcome he deserved. He never saw his grandchildren. But his legacy did not die with him. It lived on in doctrine, in military theory, and an enduring understanding that speed, momentum, and audacity can achieve what firepower and numbers alone cannot. In private letters written after Patton's death, Dwight D. Eisenhower reflected, "George was the most brilliant combat commander I ever knew. Also the most difficult. I would not have won the war without him. I probably could not have survived peacetime with him. He was a warrior in the truest sense, uncomfortable in any world but war, transcendent in combat. That may be the truest epitaph Patton could ever have. A warrior in the truest sense, transcendent in combat. The Third Army Patton built, the techniques he pioneered, and the operational tempo he established became foundational to American armor doctrine. The 1949 U.S. Army Field Manual on Armored Operations incorporated lessons drawn directly from Third Army's 1945 campaigns. The airland battle doctrine of the 1980s echoed Patton's emphasis on speed, deep penetration, and attacking the enemy's cohesion rather than his front line. Even modern maneuver warfare theory owes a debt to what Patton proved possible in 1945. He captured 50,000 Germans overnight, not through superior firepower, not through overwhelming numbers, but through speed, through momentum, through understanding that in war, the enemy's mind is the ultimate battlefield. Confuse it, overload it, move faster than it can think, and the enemy will defeat himself. That was Patton's genius. And that is why Eisenhower said what he said on March 29th, 1945, standing in a captured German city, looking at maps that showed what should have been impossible. "You're the only man I know who can make the impossible routine." It wasn't a compliment. It wasn't an insult. It was simply the truth. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching WWII Deep Dive. This is what we do here, not just recounting famous battles, but exploring the personalities, the decisions, and the moments that changed everything. If you want more stories like this, make sure you're subscribed, hit the notification bell, leave a comment telling me which World War II story you want to hear next, and share this video with anyone who loves military history. These stories deserve to be remembered. These men deserve to be honored, and the lessons they taught us deserve to be learned. Thank you for watching, and remember, history isn't just about what happened. It's about understanding why it happened and what it still means for us today.